Mm.
Welcome, everyone, to this evening's edition of Stories for Healing. This is a project that started, of all days, on Halloween. And it occurred to me that we were in a pretty tough place. There was a lot of division, a lot of antagonism, a lot of fear and concern and worry, and, just not the best place to be in. And I asked myself, well, what am I going to do about this? And the answer was clear. Being a storyteller, I'll tell some stories. And it didn't take more than an hour to think, well, there's probably other storytellers who want to tell stories too. And before you know it, I had 36 storytellers and growing who would like to tell stories, but not just any story, stories of healing, stories of reconciliation, of transformation, stories that don't tell us that I'm right and you're wrong, or this is good and that's bad, but how we grapple with these differences and turn them into something that's a better world. So tonight we have the very special privilege of having Roger Jenkins tell us a story. So Roger, would you please tell us a story?
Well, thanks very much, Jim. It's a delight to be with you. Here in Singapore, it's actually very early in the morning. So just trying to, get myself ready for you. It's wonderful to be with you. And the story that I want to share with you today comes from Ethiopia. Normally I tell stories from Asia. Today the story is from Ethiopia. And it's about a young boy, I'll call him Caleb with a K. And when he was about 7 going on 8, unfortunately his mother was killed in a workplace accident, which left him obviously devastated and hurt, grieving, upset, angry. And his father tried as best he could over the following year and a half to help the boy heal. But it was hard. And his father was an engineer. And about 18 months after the accident, his father was sent up into the mountains on a project, building a bridge. And Caleb was left with a good neighbor. And the father was away for 6 months and made only intermittent visits back to see the boy. And while he was there up in the village in the mountains, he met someone, a woman, Zubira. And they got on so well together that when finally the father returned, he brought with him his new wife. And she was a good woman, and she desperately wanted to be a mother to Caleb. But Caleb was still grieving, he was still hurt and angry, and he wanted to keep her always at a distance. Even though she tried to cook him his favorite foods, he would not eat it with pleasure and say, "My mother was a much better cook." When she went with him and his father to the nearby lake, she had never seen placid water before up in the mountains. And when the boy and his father played a game of skipping a stone across the water, she tried, but she couldn't do it. And the boy mocked her, which made his father very angry, and the boy, very sullen, blamed her and said it was her fault. He would not help her with the chores. When she tried to move the heavy wooden table in the yard and place it where the evening sun would catch it so that they could eat their dinner outdoors, he would not help, said he had homework, and left her alone. And one night, when his father was delayed at work, and she, Subira, was happy because she thought she would have a chance to sit with him and talk with him. He would not talk with her. They ate in silence. He would not talk about the football game. And later, when she walked past his bedroom, she saw that he was reading on his bed. And she came in and she asked him about the book and even offered to read for him. But he said, "No, you're not my mother. Leave me alone. Go away." And it hurt her deeply. So the next day, after her husband had gone to work and the boy had gone to school, She went to see the local tribal doctor, a very wise woman, wise in the ways of the world. And she asked this doctor, please, she said, I need a love potion. And the doctor, oh, a love potion. And who is the man? She said, no, no, this is for my stepson. I want him to love me as much as I am trying to love him. And the doctor said, oh, for that you need a very powerful potion. And the only way that you can make such a love potion is with a very special ingredient. Tell me, said Zubera, anything and I will get it. And the doctor said, you must go and get for me a whisker from a mountain lion. Huh? Said Zubera, how am I supposed to get a whisker from a mountain lion? I'm sorry, said the doctor, that is not my place. I cannot tell you. All I can say is that if you wish this potion to work, that is what you must fetch. So that night, Zubera spoke with her husband after Caleb had gone to bed and said the following day she must return to her village in the mountains. And she was up very, very early before the sun, and she went to the bus station and took the long ride back home. And when she got back home, she went to the market and she bought some meat, 4 joints of really juicy meat, including one that was thick upon the bone. And then she set off out from the village into the forest. And she climbed and climbed up the mountain until she came to the edge of the forest and saw in front of her there was the trail, mountain lion paw prints, that she had followed and led her to this place. And there in front of her, in the rock cliff, there was a cave. And she waited and she waited. She heard a growl from inside the cave and knew the lion must be there. So cautiously, with her heart in her mouth, she stepped out from the protection of the trees and made her way slowly, carefully, towards the mouth of the cave. A few meters short, she stopped, and from her bag, she took out one of the pieces of meat and placed it on the ground, and then she backed away. She backed all the way back from the cave to the edge of the forest, thinking that perhaps if the lion came out when he saw her, if he decided to charge her, she would still be able to climb into a tree. She was not sure that she would be safe, but at least it was something. Suddenly the lion came out. He saw the meat and he raised his big heavy head and he looked straight at the woman. He growled. She stood her ground. And the lion then turned his gaze back to the meat and came and bent down beside it and took it in his great jaws and chewed and ate it. And then he stood, licked his lips and turned and went back into the cave. Zubera waited a long, long time, hoping that he would then be hungry again. And then she went forward once more, slowly, carefully, cautiously, nervously, but determined that she had to do this. And she placed another piece of meat in the same place in front of the cave. And again, she backed away, but she did not go all the way back to the forest, but stopped. In fact, as she stood there, she thought, there's no way. If the lion chases me now, I don't think I can get to the tree. And a little while later, the lion came out. He saw the meat and he saw the woman and he looked at her. And then he went back to the meat, crouched down, and again, he ate every last piece of it. And when he had finished, he turned and went back into the cave. And patiently, Zubera waited again, letting him digest that meat before again she went and she placed the meat, the third piece of meat, on the ground. And she stepped back and she moved several paces away, perhaps 5, 6 meters, no more. And she waited and she waited. And again, a third time, the lion came out. He saw the meat, he saw her. He growled softly, looked at her a moment, and then turned his attention to the meat and wolfed that down too. And when he had finished and gone back into the cave, Zubira still waited. In the hot sun, she waited. And finally, she walked forward, and from her bag, she took out the bone. The meat was on the bone, and she placed that on the ground. And then she stepped back, but only a pace, and she crouched down, so close that she could have almost reached out and touched the meat. And with her heart pounding, she waited. And eventually, the mountain lion came out from his cave and he saw the woman. He looked at the bone. And then he came and he crouched down and he put his paws around the bone and he began to gnaw and chew. He was so close that she could hear his breathing. She could smell his breath. And she could see the wonderful, wonderful whiskers around his mouth. And as he, engrossed in the bone, Zubira reached out her hand slowly, carefully, and she came and then she plucked one of those whiskers and the lion looked at her, licked his lips, and went back to finishing the meat. And as he continued to devour the flesh off the bone, Zubira, holding that prize in her fingers, slowly she stood up. And without taking her eyes off the lion, she backed away, she backed towards the trees until finally, in the safety of the tree, it seemed that she was able to breathe again. And placing the whisker carefully in her pocket, she then ran back down the hillside, through the forest, back down to the village, to the bus station, and got on the bus and returned and made the long journey all the way home. The moment that she arrived at the hometown, she went straight to see the doctor. She burst into his room and said, here it is. I have the whisker from the mountain lion. Now, please, make me the potion. And the doctor took the whisker and he looked at it and said, wow, this is indeed a very special whisker. And he took the whisker and he threw it into the fire. Ha! What are you doing? Said Zubira. And the doctor looked at her and she said, there is no love potion. That is the stuff of stories. Why did you make me do it? Why did you make me risk my life? Because, said the doctor, now you know that you have the courage, you have all the skills, that you can get yourself close enough to a mountain lion for it to trust you, to let you get close enough to take its whisker. If you can do that for a mountain lion, you can do that for a 10-year-old boy. And Zubira thought and said, yes, perhaps I can. How did you approach the lion? And Zubira laughed and she said, very slowly, nervously, cautiously, did you ever give up? No, said Zubira. I knew I had to do it. So you were persistent? Yes, she said. I was determined. Good. Then go home and treat your boy the same way. And she did. Subira went home and she didn't try to please him. She didn't try to impress him. She didn't go out of her way to make the food that he wanted or that he liked. When they next went to the lake, she said, if only I knew how to throw the stones. If only I knew what I was doing wrong. And Caleb couldn't resist and said, let me show you. And before long, he was teaching her. And they threw the stones together. One morning, he was very excited because he had a football game and he talked with his father about strategies and how he might score a goal. But in excitement, he ran off to the bus and forgot his football boots. And Subira picked them up. And though because she had no money, having spent what money she had on that bus trip home to her village, she walked all the way to his school and stood outside the gates, for they would not let her in. And she saw him come out for recess, sad, and sit down on the steps with his friends. But when she called his name and held up his football boots, his face lit up, and he ran across the playground, put his hand through the gates and took the boots and turned, yay! And he began to run back towards his friends, but stopped and turned back and looked at her and mouthed a simple thanks. And a few days later, when she was out in the yard struggling to pull that heavy wooden table into a new position to catch the sun, unasked, Caleb came and helped her to move it. And one evening, again, when his father was late, and she walked past his room and saw that he was reading, she came in and asked him about the book. And he told her, and she offered to read because he said that he was too tired to carry on reading. And he said, yes, he would like that. And she sat on the bed beside him and began to read him the book. And as she read the story, Caleb suddenly realized that this was a woman who could also, just like his mother, make a book come alive. She could make him laugh. And just like his mother, she also was willing to give him time and love him too. And to his surprise, Caleb suddenly realized that his heart was much, much bigger than he ever dreamed it could possibly be. And though the love for his birth mother was huge, there was still room enough for him to love someone else, this woman, Subira. And he lay against her and snuggled by her side. And when she got to the end of the chapter, Subira said, enough, you need to sleep. But if you like, I will read to you again tomorrow night. And Caleb looked at her and said, yes, I'd like that. And as she kissed him on the forehead, she said, I love you. And she heard his soft voice from in the back, I love you too, Subira. That is the story.
Oh, thank you so much, Roger. Thank you so much. A wonderful story. I love the end where we are walked through her courtship of him, not just left unspoken.
Yeah.
Of all the things she might have done for him first, I noticed that the first thing she did was to ask him to teach her. Do you have a thought about that?
I don't know. It just seemed that this for me was, again, this is my retelling of
Sure.
the story, that it was just a natural way that they could bond, and that the boy, from wanting to, almost superior and wanting to do that, and he doesn't realize that what he's doing is changing the nature of the relationship. Yeah. Also, because he's now put himself, he's an expert, and whenever you can put a child in a position where they become the expert and they can teach you, I think that is a huge changer. They're so used to being told, do this, do that, and you need to learn, and you've made a mistake. So to be told you are the expert and please teach me is very powerful for, well, it's for anybody, really.
Well, and that was my thought, was that, you know, in these divided times, what a wonderful first step to go to someone and say, I don't understand this. Would you help me understand? Rather than say, here's what I believe, or here's what I think you should do. And even the wonderful kindnesses that she does for him come after that acknowledgement that there's a worth and a value for him. So from him. So that's great.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you. So folks, as you know, this is the end of tonight's episode. I do want to invite you to come back tomorrow morning or evening if you're Roger, and or tomorrow afternoon or evening if you're Roger, to have another story told. We are doing this because we all believe that it's through stories that we can actually make a change, and in large part because when I tell you a story and when you listen, we each enter a new world together. And we see the world differently because we're seeing it not through just our eyes, but the other's eyes. And I think that's what it's all about. So thanks again. Stay tuned, and we look forward to seeing you next time around.